Hey guys, tonight we begin with the human mind. Those quiet experiences the mind creates when the day finally lets go. Before you get comfortable, if calm, thoughtful videos like this help you unwind, you can gently like the video or subscribe, only if it feels right. And if you'd like, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, let the room soften, and slowly drift with me through the quiet psychology of the human mind. There is a place you have always lived, though you rarely stop to see it. It exists without walls, without borders, without sound. It is not somewhere you travel to, but somewhere you are constantly, silently, effortlessly. This place is your mind, and tonight we enter it slowly, the way one might step into a familiar room at dusk, letting the eyes adjust, letting the stillness settle. Psychology is the gentle study of this inner space. It asks quiet questions. How do we think? How do we feel? Why do we remember some things and forget others? Why does the heart sometimes race when the world around us is calm? These are not questions that demand answers, not tonight. They are simply doorways, softly opened, leading deeper into the landscape of what it means to be human. The mind is always working, even when you are not. Right now, as you rest, as your breath slows, as your body finds its place in the sheets, your mind is orchestrating thousands of tiny processes. It is balancing chemicals, sending signals, weaving together sensations into something you call experience. And yet, for all its activity, the mind can be quiet, it can rest, it can drift. That is what we are here to explore, not the noise of the mind, but its stillness, not its urgency, but its rhythm. Psychology teaches us that the mind is not a machine. It is more like a garden or a sky or a slow-moving river. It changes with the seasons. It has weather. Sometimes it is bright and clear. Sometimes it is clouded. Sometimes thoughts drift across it like leaves on water, and sometimes there is only the surface, smooth and undisturbed. You do not need to understand every part of your mind to let it rest. You do not need to control it or fix it or make it behave. The mind, left to itself, knows how to settle. Tonight, we will walk together through this inner landscape, not to learn, but to simply be, to observe, to let the facts of psychology wash over us like soft rain, not to remember them, but to feel their gentle presence. The mind is vast, but it is also small. It fits inside your skull, and yet it contains entire worlds, memories of places you have been, faces you have loved, dreams you have forgotten, fears that rise and fall like tides. The mind holds all of this without effort. It does not strain. It does not complain. It simply is. And that, perhaps, is the first quiet truth we can hold tonight. The mind exists, it works, and it does not need your permission to rest. As you listen, your mind is already beginning to slow. The beta waves that carry active thought are softening into alpha waves, the ones that accompany relaxation. Soon, if you let them, theta waves will arrive, those slow, rolling rhythms that come just before sleep. This is not something you do. It is something that happens naturally, inevitably, like water finding its level. Psychology has spent over a century trying to map the mind, to understand its corridors and chambers, its hidden rooms. And while much has been learned, the mind remains in many ways a mystery. Not a frightening mystery, but a gentle one. The kind of mystery that invites you to sit beside it without needing to solve it. Tonight, we will touch on many facts, many small discoveries, but we will hold them lightly. We will let them pass through us like wind through an open window. Because the goal is not to fill the mind with knowledge, but to empty it of effort. To let it become what it naturally is when left undisturbed, a quiet, breathing, living space. So let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, let your thoughts do whatever they wish. They may wander, they may circle, they may disappear entirely. All of this is welcome. The mind is not something you need to manage right now. It is something you can simply witness from a distance, as if watching clouds move across a summer sky. And as we drift deeper into this quiet exploration, know that there is no test at the end. No need to remember. No need to hold on. Just the soft unfolding of understanding and the slow, inevitable pull toward rest. The mind is not a single thing. It is an environment, a vast internal ecosystem where thoughts bloom and wither, where emotions rise like mist and settle again, where memories are stored in layers like sediment at the bottom of a lake. To study the mind is to study a living system, one that is always moving, always adjusting, always seeking balance. The ancient Greeks believed the mind was divided into parts. Plato spoke of reason, spirit, and appetite, each pulling the self in different directions. Freud, centuries later, imagined the id, ego, and superego, a landscape of desires and defenses. But modern psychology sees the mind as something more fluid, more interconnected. Not a kingdom with borders, but a network of processes, each one influencing the others, none fully separate. The mind has climates. There are warm periods when thoughts flow easily, when creativity feels effortless, when the world seems kind. And there are cold periods when everything feels distant, when motivation fades, when even simple tasks feel heavy. These are not failures, they are seasons. The mind, like nature, cycles. It expands and contracts, it blooms and goes dormant. And this is not something to resist. It is something to acknowledge, the way you might acknowledge winter without wishing it away. Inside this mental environment, there are landmarks. There is perception, the gateway through which the world enters. There is attention, the spotlight that decides what to illuminate. There is memory, the quiet archive that stores what has been. There is emotion, the weather system that colors everything. And there is thought itself, the endless stream of words and images that flows through awareness like a river. None of these exist alone. Perception shapes memory. Memory influences emotion. Emotion colors thought. Thought directs attention. They are always in conversation, always shaping one another, creating the experience you call your life. And yet, for all this complexity, the mind does not feel complicated from the inside. Most of the time, you simply are. You see, you feel, you think, and it all happens so smoothly that you rarely notice the thousands of processes working together to create each moment. This is one of the mind's greatest gifts. It hides its own workings. It lets you move through the world without needing to understand how. You do not think about how to walk. You do not decide, step by step, to lift your foot, shift your weight, place it down again. The mind does this for you quietly in the background, leaving your awareness free to notice other things. A bird in a tree, the warmth of sunlight, the smell of bread baking. This is the mind's kindness. It handles the details so you can experience the whole. The mind also has rhythms, natural cycles that govern when you feel alert and when you feel tired, when you are most creative and when you are most reflective. These rhythms are ancient, built into the structure of the brain over millions of years. They are not arbitrary. They are responses to the world, to the rising and setting of the sun, to the need for rest and activity, for solitude and connection. In the morning, cortisol rises, gently waking the body and mind. In the evening, melatonin begins to seep into the bloodstream, signaling that the day is ending, that it is time to slow. These are not commands, they are invitations. The mind is always inviting you to align with its natural flow, to work when it is ready to work, to rest when it is ready to rest. But the modern world often interrupts these rhythms. Electric light extends the day. Screens stimulate the mind late into the night. Schedules demand alertness at times when the body longs for stillness. And so the mind adapts. It learns to push through. It learns to ignore its own signals, but the signals remain beneath the surface, quietly waiting. And when you finally allow yourself to rest, when you dim the lights and lie down and let go, the mind remembers what it was always meant to do. It begins to settle. It begins to soften. It begins to return to its natural state, which is not effort but ease, not noise but quiet, not doing, but simply being. Psychology tells us that the mind is shaped by experience. Every moment you live, every conversation you have, every sight, sound, and sensation leaves a small trace. Some of these traces fade quickly, others last a lifetime. Together, they form the architecture of who you are. Your preferences, your fears, your habits, your sense of self, all of it built from experience, layered over time like rings in a tree. And yet, the mind is not fixed. It is constantly rewriting itself, constantly adapting. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its own structure in response to what you do, what you think, what you practice. The mind is not a finished thing. It is a living, breathing, evolving landscape. And this means that rest is not passive. Rest is part of the process. It is during rest that the mind consolidates memories, that it repairs neural pathways, that it integrates the experiences of the day. Sleep is not a break from life. It is where life is processed, organized, stored. Without it, the mind begins to fray. Thoughts become scattered. Emotions become unstable. The world feels harder than it should, but with rest, with true, deep rest, the mind restores itself. It finds its balance. Again, and so, as you lie here now, as your breath deepens and your body grows heavy, know that you are not wasting time. You are giving the mind what it needs. You are letting it do what it does best, which is to heal, to process, to settle into the quiet rhythm that sustains all the rest. Thoughts are strange, delicate things. They arrive without warning, often without invitation. You might be reading or walking or staring at the sky, and suddenly a thought appears. A memory of something from years ago, a worry about tomorrow, a fragment of a song. Where did it come from? You did not call for it. You did not decide to think it. And yet there it is, vivid and immediate, as if it had always been there, waiting. The mind generates thoughts constantly, effortlessly, like a spring produces water. Some estimates suggest that the average person has between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. Most of them are fleeting. Most of them are forgotten within seconds. They pass through awareness like clouds across the sky, noticed briefly, then gone. This is the nature of thought. It is impermanent. It is transient. It is not solid. And yet, when a thought is present, it feels real. It feels important. It feels like something you must attend to. But the truth, the quiet truth that psychology has discovered, is that you do not have to believe every thought that crosses your mind. You do not have to act on every impulse. You do not have to hold on to every worry. Thoughts are events, not facts. They are mental phenomena like sensations or sounds. They arise, they linger, and they fade. And if you let them, they will do this on their own, without effort, without struggle. One of the most calming realizations in psychology is this: you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear. You are the space that holds them, the quiet background against which they move. This distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. When you identify with your thoughts, when you believe that you are the voice inside your head, then every anxious thought becomes a personal crisis. Every critical thought becomes a truth. Every worry becomes a command. But when you recognize that thoughts are simply events, that they come and go like weather, then you can watch them without being consumed by them. You can let them pass. This is not suppression. It is not denial. It is simply allowing. Allowing thoughts to be what they are, temporary, fleeting, and ultimately harmless. Cognitive scientists have studied how thoughts form, and they have found that many of them are automatic, generated by patterns the brain has learned over time. If you have ever worried about the same thing over and over, or found yourself replaying a conversation in your mind, you have experienced this. The brain has learned a loop, a habitual pattern of thinking, and it runs that pattern whenever certain triggers appear. But here is the gentle truth: habits can be changed. Loops can be interrupted, not by force, but by awareness. Simply by noticing a thought, by recognizing it as a thought rather than a reality, you weaken its hold. You create a small space between yourself and the pattern, and in that space there is freedom. There is also a rhythm to thought. Thoughts are more frequent when the mind is active, when you are engaged with the world, solving problems, making plans. But as you relax, as the body settles and the nervous system softens, thoughts begin to slow. They lose their urgency. They become more dreamlike, more abstract. This is the mind transitioning from beta waves to alpha waves, from active thinking to passive awareness. And if you continue to relax, if you let go even further, the thoughts may dissolve entirely, leaving only a quiet, open awareness like a still pond at dawn. This state is not absence. It is presence. It is the mind resting in itself without needing anything to hold onto. Meditation practices from around the world have long understood this. They do not try to stop thoughts. They simply teach the mind to watch them, to let them arise and fall without clinging. And in doing so, they reveal what has always been true, that the mind is naturally spacious, naturally calm when it is not caught in its own activity. You do not need to meditate to experience this. You only need to rest, to lie still, to breathe softly, to let the thoughts do whatever they wish. They may swirl for a while. They may protest. They may try to pull your attention toward tasks, toward worries, toward the future. But if you do not follow them, if you simply stay here, in this moment, in this body, in this breath, they will eventually quiet. Not because you forced them, but because they ran out of fuel. Thoughts need attention to survive. Without it, they fade like echoes in an empty room. And what remains when the thoughts have settled is not emptiness. It is peace. It is the quiet hum of awareness itself, steady and unchanged. Like the surface of the ocean far below the waves. This is where you can rest. Not in the absence of thought, but in the space that holds all thought, the awareness that is always here, always calm, always welcoming. So let the thoughts come. Let them go. Do not fight them. Do not follow them. Simply notice them the way you might notice leaves floating down a stream, and let them carry on downstream out of sight into the quiet distance where all thoughts eventually dissolve. Beneath the surface of your awareness, there is another mind at work. You do not hear it. You do not see it. You do not consciously direct it. And yet, it is always there, quietly managing the countless tasks that keep you alive, that keep you balanced, that shape your experience in ways you will never fully understand. This is the subconscious mind, and it is perhaps the most powerful force within you. The conscious mind, the one you identify with, the one that thinks and plans and decides, is small. It can hold only a few pieces of information at a time. Psychologists call this working memory, and it is limited, precious, easily overwhelmed. But the subconscious mind is vast. It holds everything you have ever learned, every skill you have ever practiced, every memory, every pattern, every instinct. It is the part of you that knows how to breathe without being told. The part that makes your heart beat, that regulates your temperature, that digests your food. It is the part that recognizes faces in a crowd, that senses danger before you consciously notice it, that learns languages and music and movements without needing explicit instruction. The subconscious does not speak in words. It speaks in feelings, in impulses, in sudden knowings. Have you ever had the experience of meeting someone and immediately feeling uneasy without knowing why? That is the subconscious, reading tiny signals, body language, tone of voice, micro-expressions, and delivering a conclusion before your conscious mind has even begun to analyze. Have you ever solved a problem without trying, the answer arriving suddenly while you were doing something else entirely? That is the subconscious, working in the background, sifting through possibilities, connecting patterns, until it finds the solution and hands it to you, fully formed. Much of what we call intuition is simply the subconscious mind at work. It is not magic. It is pattern recognition, honed over years of experience, operating faster and more efficiently than conscious thought ever could. The subconscious learns by repetition. Every time you do something, every time you think something, every time you react in a certain way, the subconscious takes note. It strengthens that pathway, making it easier to repeat. This is how habits form, not through willpower, but through repetition. The subconscious does not judge whether a habit is good or bad. It simply makes it automatic. This is why breaking a habit is so difficult. You are not just fighting a behavior. You are fighting a deeply ingrained pattern, one that the subconscious has spent years perfecting. But here is the quiet hope. The subconscious can also learn new patterns. It can unlearn old ones. It is not fixed. It is not rigid. It is responsive. And one of the most effective ways to communicate with the subconscious is through consistency, through gentle repetition, through creating new patterns that over time become just as automatic as the old ones. The subconscious also governs much of what we call emotion. When something happens, a sound, a smell, a sight, the subconscious compares it to past experiences, determines whether it is safe or dangerous, pleasant or unpleasant, and triggers an emotional response. This happens in milliseconds, long before the conscious mind has had time to think. This is why emotions can feel so overwhelming, so irrational. They are not irrational, they are just faster than thought. They are the subconscious mind's way of protecting you, of guiding you, of signaling what matters. And while emotions can be uncomfortable, they are not the enemy. They are information. They are the subconscious trying to communicate. And when you learn to listen, when you learn to notice what you feel without immediately reacting, you begin to understand yourself in a deeper way. You begin to see the patterns, the triggers, the old stories that the subconscious is still holding onto. And with that awareness, gently, slowly, you can begin to rewrite those stories, not by force, not by suppression, but by offering the subconscious new experiences, new patterns, new ways of being. At night, the subconscious becomes even more active. This is when it processes the day, sorting through memories, deciding what to keep and what to discard, integrating new information with old. This is why sleep is so essential. Without it, the subconscious cannot do its work. Memories remain unprocessed. Emotions remain unresolved. The mind becomes cluttered, overwhelmed, unable to function at its best. But with rest, with deep, uninterrupted rest, the subconscious can restore order. It can file away what needs to be saved, release what no longer serves, and prepare the mind for the next day. This is not something you need to control. It is something you can trust. The subconscious knows what to do. It has been doing this work for as long as you have been alive, quietly, efficiently, without needing your permission. And so, as you lie here, as your body grows heavy and your thoughts begin to blur, you can trust that the subconscious is taking over. It is guiding you toward sleep, toward rest, toward the deep, renewing darkness where the mind can finally let go. You do not need to manage this process. You do not need to think your way into sleep. You only need to allow it, to release control, to let the subconscious do what it has always done, which is to care for you, to protect you, to carry you gently into the quiet world of rest. Attention is a curious thing. It feels like something you control, something you direct with intention. But the truth is, attention is often pulled, not pushed. It is drawn toward movement, toward novelty, toward anything that stands out from the background. This is not a flaw. It is a survival mechanism, an ancient reflex designed to keep you safe. For thousands of years, a sudden movement in the periphery might have been a predator, a threat, something that demanded immediate focus. And so the mind learned to prioritize the unexpected, the changing, the new. Even now, in a world where predators are rare, attention still follows the same rules. It is drawn to bright lights, to loud sounds, to anything that contrasts with the stillness around it. This is why it is so hard to focus in a noisy environment, why your eyes are drawn to a screen even when you are trying to read, why distractions feel so powerful. They are not more important than what you're trying to focus on. They are simply more salient. They activate the brain's orienting response, an automatic shift of attention toward the source of stimulation. But attention is not just reactive. It can also be sustained, held gently on a single point, like a beam of light illuminating one small part of a vast darkness. This kind of attention is called focused attention, and it requires effort, not because it is difficult, but because it goes against the mind's natural tendency to wander. The mind wants to explore. It wants to scan the environment, to check for changes, to make sure everything is safe. And so, even when you try to focus, the mind drifts. It checks in with the body. It remembers something from earlier. It wonders what comes next. This is not failure. It is the mind doing what it was designed to do. And the gentle practice of noticing when attention has drifted and guiding it back is one of the most calming exercises you can do. Not forcing, not scolding. Just noticing and returning over and over like a leaf floating back to the center of a pond. There is also something called open awareness, a state where attention is not focused on any one thing, but spread wide, taking in everything at once without clinging to anything in particular. This is the awareness you have when you are simply being, when you are not trying to accomplish anything, not trying to understand or analyze or remember. Just perceiving, just present. This state is deeply restful. It is the mind at ease, not working, not straining, simply resting in the flow of experience. Psychologists have found that the ability to control attention, to shift it intentionally, to sustain it when needed and release it when appropriate, is one of the strongest predictors of well-being. People who can focus when they need to and let go when they do not report higher levels of satisfaction, lower levels of stress, and a greater sense of control over their lives. But this ability is not innate. It is a skill, one that can be practiced, strengthened, and refined over time. And one of the simplest ways to practice it is through rest. Through lying down, closing your eyes, and noticing where your attention goes. Does it follow sounds? Does it focus on sensations in the body? Does it drift into thought? There is no wrong answer, only observation. Only the gentle act of noticing, without judgment, without correction, just seeing where the mind naturally wants to go. And in that seeing, in that soft awareness, attention begins to settle. It begins to relax. It stops trying so hard to hold on to anything, and instead simply floats, open and receptive, like the surface of a calm lake reflecting the sky. The brain itself has networks dedicated to attention. The dorsal attention network is involved in voluntary, goal-directed focus. The ventral attention network responds to unexpected stimuli, pulling attention toward anything that might be important. And the default mode network, which activates when you are not focused on any external task, is involved in mind wandering, in internal reflection, in the quiet thoughts that arise when you are not trying to think. These networks do not work in isolation. They communicate, they balance, they take turns being active. And when the mind is healthy, when it is well rested, these networks function smoothly, shifting between focus and rest, between engagement and daydreaming, without conflict. But when the mind is tired, when it is overstimulated, when it has not had time to recover, these networks become dysregulated. Attention becomes scattered. Focus becomes difficult. The mind feels fragmented, pulled in too many directions at once. And the solution, the only real solution, is rest. Not distraction, not more stimulation, but true rest. The kind that allows the brain to reset, to restore balance, to let the networks recalibrate. And so as you lie here, as your attention drifts and settles, know that this is not wasted time. This is the mind practicing what it needs most, the ability to let go, the ability to simply be without needing to focus, without needing to achieve, without needing to do anything at all. Just the soft, quiet presence of awareness itself, resting in the stillness, letting the world unfold without effort, without resistance, without strain. Memory is not a filing cabinet. It is not a library where each experience is carefully cataloged and stored in a specific location, waiting to be retrieved. Memory is more like a river, constantly moving, constantly changing, carrying pieces of the past forward into the present, but never quite the same way twice. Every time you remember something, you are not accessing a fixed record. You are reconstructing it, piecing it together from fragments, from associations, from the emotions and context of the present moment. And in that reconstruction, the memory changes. It is influenced by what you know now, by what you feel now, by what you believe now. This is why two people can remember the same event differently. This is why your own memories of childhood, when examined closely, may shift and blur and rearrange themselves over time. Memory is not truth, it is interpretation. And yet it feels true. It feels solid. It feels like the past is a real place, somewhere you can return to, somewhere that still exists unchanged. But the past does not exist, not in the way we imagine. It exists only as patterns of neural activity, as connections between neurons, as pathways that have been strengthened through repetition. And those pathways are not stable. They are dynamic, living, constantly being rewritten by the act of remembering itself. Psychologists call this reconsolidation, the process by which memories are updated each time they are recalled. When you remember something, the memory becomes temporarily unstable, open to change, and when it is stored again, it incorporates elements of the present moment. This is not a flaw. It is a feature. It allows memory to remain relevant, to adapt to new information, to integrate past and present into a coherent narrative. But it also means that memory is fragile, malleable, and ultimately subjective. There are different kinds of memory, each one serving a different purpose. There is episodic memory, the memory of events, of specific moments in time. The first day of school, a conversation with a friend, the smell of rain on a summer evening. These memories are rich, detailed, tied to a sense of place and time. Then there is semantic memory, the memory of facts, of knowledge, of things you have learned but do not remember learning. You know that Paris is the capital of France, but you do not remember the moment you learned it. You know how to read, but you do not recall the specific lessons that taught you. This is semantic memory, abstract and impersonal but essential. There is also procedural memory, the memory of how to do things. How to ride a bike, how to tie your shoes, how to type without looking at the keys. These memories are stored not in words or images, but in the body, in the muscles, in the neural pathways that govern movement. They are unconscious, automatic, and incredibly durable. You can forget names, forget faces, forget entire events, but you rarely forget how to walk. The formation of memory begins with attention. If you do not pay attention to something, it will not be encoded. It will pass through awareness and leave no trace. This is why you can drive the same route every day and not remember a single moment of the journey. The mind was not paying attention. It was on autopilot, guided by procedural memory, while conscious awareness was elsewhere. But when something captures your attention, when something is surprising or emotional or meaningful, the brain releases neurotransmitters that signal, "This is important, remember this." And the memory is encoded more deeply, more vividly, more likely to be retained. Emotion is one of the strongest triggers. S for memory. You are more likely to remember something that made you feel joy or fear or sadness than something that left you indifferent. This is why childhood memories are often tied to moments of strong emotion. A birthday party, a scraped knee, a thunderstorm. The emotion acts as a highlighter, marking the memory as significant, ensuring it is stored. But emotion can also distort memory. Under stress, under fear, the brain prioritizes survival over accuracy. It captures the gist of what happened, the emotional tone, the sense of danger, but it may miss details, may fill in gaps with assumptions, may misremember the sequence of events. This is why eyewitness testimony, despite feeling certain, is often unreliable. The memory is real, but it is not necessarily accurate. Over time, memories fade, not all at once, but gradually, like a photograph left in the sun. The details blur, the colors soften. What remains is an impression, a feeling, a sense of something that once was. This is called memory decay, and it is a natural process, a way for the brain to prioritize what is most important and let go of what is not. If you remembered everything, the mind would be overwhelmed, unable to function, buried under the weight of every trivial moment. Forgetting is not failure, it is necessary. But some memories do not fade. They remain vivid, clear, as if they happened yesterday. These are often called flashbulb memories, moments so significant that the brain encodes not just the event, but the entire context. Where you were, what you were wearing, who you were with. These memories feel permanent, but research has shown that they too are subject to change, to distortion, to the same reconstructive process as all other memories. They feel more reliable because they are more emotional, not because they are more accurate. And so, as you lie here, as your mind drifts through the soft landscape of the past, know that what you remember is not the past itself, but a story the mind has told about the past. And that story is not fixed. It can change, it can soften, it can release its hold. You do not have to carry every memory. You do not have to hold on to every detail. The mind, when allowed to rest, will sort through what it has stored, will let go of what no longer serves, and will keep only what is needed. This is not loss. This is care. This is the mind taking care of itself, gently, quietly, in the deep stillness of the night. Emotions are not interruptions. They are not disruptions to an otherwise rational mind. They are signals, quiet messages from the deeper parts of yourself, telling you what matters, what feels safe, what needs attention. Emotions are not good or bad. They simply are. They arise, they inform, and if you let them, they pass. But if you resist them, if you try to push them away, they linger. They intensify. They demand to be felt. The word emotion comes from the Latin emover, which means to move out, to move through. Emotions are meant to flow. They are meant to rise and fall like waves, each one carrying information, delivering it, and then receding. But somewhere along the way, many of us learn to hold emotions in, to suppress them, to ignore them. And when emotions are not allowed to move, they become stuck. They become tension in the body, tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach. They become the background hum of anxiety, the weight of sadness that never quite lifts. Psychology recognizes several primary emotions: joy, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, disgust, each one serving a specific function. Fear alerts you to danger. Anger signals a boundary has been crossed. Sadness marks loss, invites reflection, slows you down so you can process what has changed. Joy tells you that something is good, something is worth repeating, worth moving toward. These emotions are not flaws. They are guidance, but modern life often complicates this. Emotions that made sense in ancient environments, the fear that kept you alert to predators, the anger that helped you defend your territory, do not always fit the situations we face today. You might feel fear before a job interview, even though there is no physical danger. You might feel anger in traffic, even though no real boundary has been violated. The emotions are real, but the context has changed. And this mismatch can make emotions feel overwhelming, confusing, out of proportion. But the emotion itself is not the problem. The problem is the story you tell about the emotion. If you feel anxious and think, something is wrong with me, I should not feel this way, the anxiety intensifies. But if you feel anxious and think, this is just fear, my body is trying to protect me, I can let it be here without acting on it, the anxiety softens. It is still present, but it is no longer a crisis. One of the most important discoveries in modern psychology is that emotions are not permanent. They have a natural lifespan. Research suggests that the physiological response of an emotion, the racing heart, the flushed face, the tightness in the chest, lasts only about 90 seconds. 90 seconds. That is how long it takes for the neurochemical surge to rise, peak, and dissipate. But if the emotion lasts longer than that, it is because you are feeding it with thought. You are replaying the story, reimagining the situation, reinforcing the feeling. This is not wrong. It is human, but it is also something you can change. Not by suppressing the emotion, but by noticing it, by allowing it to be present without adding to it. Simply feeling the sensation in the body, without the story, without the narrative, without the need to fix it or understand it or make it go away. Just letting it be, like a storm passing through, inevitable and temporary. The body holds emotion. This is something psychology has known for a long time, but is only beginning to fully understand. When you feel sadness, your shoulders might drop. When you feel fear, your muscles might tighten. When you feel joy, your chest might open. The body and the mind are not separate. They are one system, constantly communicating, constantly influencing each other. And this means that you can work with emotion through the body. You can soften tense muscles. You can deepen your breath. You can change your posture, and in doing so, change the signal the body sends to the brain. This is not pretending. This is not faking calm. This is working with the body's natural feedback loops, using physical sensation to influence emotional state. The nervous system has two branches. The sympathetic nervous system activates the body, prepares it for action, triggers the fight or flight response. The parasympathetic nervous system calms the body, promotes rest, activates the relaxation response. When emotions run high, the sympathetic system is dominant. The heart races. The breath quickens. The body is ready to move. But when you slow the breath, when you soften the body, when you allow yourself to rest, the parasympathetic system takes over. The heart slows. The muscles relax. The mind quiets. This is not forced. It is invited. It is the body's natural rhythm, the rhythm that governs all living things: activation and rest, tension and release, effort and ease. And right now, as you lie here, as your breath deepens and your body settles, the parasympathetic system is doing its work. It is calming the heart. It is soothing the mind. It is telling the brain that it is safe, that there is no threat, that rest is not only possible but necessary. Emotions are also deeply social. We do not feel them in isolation. We feel them in response to others, and we regulate them through connection. A kind word can ease sadness. A shared laugh can dissolve tension. A hug can calm fear. This is because the nervous system is not just internal. It is relational. It is constantly attuning to the people around you, sensing their emotions, mirroring their states. This is why being around calm people helps you feel calm. This is why anxiety can spread through a group. The nervous systems are communicating beneath the level of words, through tone, through posture, through the subtle cues that the subconscious mind picks up instantly. And so, even when you are alone, even when you are simply listening to a voice, your nervous system is responding. It is attuning. It is matching the rhythm, the tone, the pace. And if that voice is slow, if it is soft, if it is steady, your nervous system will follow. It will slow. It will soften. It will begin to trust that rest is safe. This is not manipulation. This is simply how the body works. It is how we have survived as a species, by attuning to one another, by regulating together, by finding safety in connection. And tonight, as you drift, as the voice guides you gently deeper, your nervous system is doing what it was designed to do. It is letting go. It is releasing the tension of the day. It is allowing the emotions that have been held to finally move, to finally flow, to finally dissolve into the quiet stillness that has always been there, beneath the surface, waiting. The mind and body are not separate. This is something ancient traditions have always known, and something modern science is finally beginning to understand. Every thought affects the body. Every sensation in the body affects the mind. They are in constant conversation, constantly shaping each other, constantly creating the experience you call yourself. When you think a stressful thought, the body responds. The heart rate increases, the muscles tense, stress hormones flood the bloodstream. The body is preparing for action, even if there is no action to take, even if the threat is imagined, even if you are simply lying in bed replaying a conversation from days ago. The body does not distinguish between real danger and perceived danger. It responds to the thought as if it were real. And when you relax a tense muscle, when you deepen your breath, when you soften your face, the mind responds. The brain receives signals from the body, signals that say, we are safe, we are calm, there is no need to be on guard. And the mind begins to quiet. The thoughts slow. The worries fade. This is the feedback loop, the constant exchange between mind and body, and it means that you have more influence over your mental state than you might realize. You do not have to wait for your thoughts to calm before your body can relax. You can relax your body, and your thoughts will follow. This is why practices like yoga, tai chi, progressive muscle relaxation, and deep breathing are so effective. They work directly with the body, using physical sensation to shift mental state. The brain is the command center, but it is not the only part of you that thinks. The gut, for example, has its own nervous system, often called the second brain, with over 100 million neurons lining the digestive tract. This enteric nervous system communicates with the brain through the vagus nerve, sending signals about hunger, discomfort, and even emotion. Have you ever felt butterflies in your stomach when nervous? That is the gut responding to a mental state. Have you ever felt nauseous when anxious? That is the gut-brain connection at work. The gut produces 90% of the body's serotonin, a neurotransmitter that regulates mood, sleep, and appetite. This is why gut health affects mental health. This is why what you eat can influence how you feel. The body is not just a vessel for the mind. It is part of the mind. It is thinking, feeling, responding constantly. The heart also communicates with the brain, sending more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. The heart has its own intrinsic nervous system, a network of neurons that can sense, process information, and make decisions independently of the brain. When the heart beats in a coherent rhythm, when the intervals between beats are smooth and regular, the brain receives signals that promote calm, clarity, and emotional balance. But when the heart rhythm is erratic, when stress or anxiety disrupts the pattern, the brain receives signals that promote vigilance, tension, and unease. This is why practices that focus on the heart, like slow breathing, like placing a hand over the chest, like visualizing warmth and calm spreading from the heart, are so effective. They create coherence. They harmonize the communication between heart and brain. They bring the entire system into balance. And balance is what the body is always seeking. Homeostasis, the body's natural tendency to maintain equilibrium, to keep temperature, blood sugar, hormone levels, and countless other variables within a narrow, stable range. This is not something you do. It is something the body does for you automatically, tirelessly, without needing your conscious involvement. But the body cannot maintain balance if it is constantly under stress, constantly activated, constantly preparing for a threat that never comes. It needs rest. It needs stillness. It needs time to recover, to repair, to restore. The immune system works best during rest. The digestive system functions more efficiently when the body is calm. Muscles rebuild during sleep. The brain consolidates memories, clears waste, resets neural pathways. All of this happens when you are not trying, when you are simply lying still, breathing softly, letting the body do what it was designed to do. And so, rest is not laziness. Rest is not indulgence. Rest is essential. It is the foundation of health, of well-being, of a mind and body that can function at their best. Without rest, everything begins to break down. With rest, everything begins to heal. The body also holds memory. Trauma, for example, is not just stored in the mind. It is stored in the body, in patterns of tension, in reflexes, in the way you hold yourself, the way you breathe. This is why trauma survivors often experience physical symptoms, chronic pain, fatigue, difficulty breathing, even when the traumatic event is long past. The body remembers, and it continues to respond as if the threat is still present. But the body can also release trauma. Through movement, through touch, through practices that help the nervous system recalibrate, the body can let go of what it has been holding. This is not quick, it is not easy, but it is possible. The body wants to heal. It wants to return to balance. And when given the right conditions, safety, time, gentleness, it will. Even now, as you lie here, the body is healing. It is repairing cells. It is balancing hormones. It is clearing metabolic waste from the brain. It is doing all of this quietly, efficiently, without needing your help. All you need to do is allow it, to not interfere, to not push, to not demand anything from yourself. Just to be here in this moment, in this body, letting it rest, letting it breathe, letting it do what it has always known how to do. The brain loves patterns. It craves it seeks them out in everything, in faces, in sounds, in sequences of events. This is not random. It is survival. Patterns allow the brain to predict what comes next, to prepare, to respond quickly without needing to analyze every single detail. If you see a shadow move in a certain way, your brain recognizes the pattern of a person walking. If you hear a certain tone of voice, your brain recognizes the pattern of anger or sadness. Patterns make the world comprehensible. They turn chaos into order. They allow you to navigate life without constant overwhelm. But the brain does not just find patterns, it creates them. Even when there is no pattern, the brain will impose one, will find connections, will see meaning in randomness. This is called apophenia, the tendency to perceive patterns where none exist. It is why people see faces in clouds, why they find meaning in coincidences, why they believe in luck, in fate, in signs. The brain is a pattern-making machine, and it does not easily accept randomness. This is also why routines are so comforting. A routine is a pattern, a predictable sequence that the brain can anticipate, that requires no effort, no decision-making, no uncertainty. When you follow the same morning routine every day, the brain knows what comes next. It can relax. It does not need to stay alert. It can run on autopilot, conserving energy for tasks that actually require attention. This is why disruptions to routine can feel so unsettling. They break the pattern. They force the brain back into active mode, into uncertainty, into a state where it must pay attention, must analyze, must decide. And while novelty can be exciting, it can also be exhausting. The brain uses more energy when it is in unfamiliar situations than when it is following familiar patterns. Familiarity is not just comforting, it is efficient. It allows the brain to function smoothly without strain. This is why people return to the same vacation spots, the same restaurants, the same routes to work. Not because they lack imagination, but because the brain values predictability. It values the ease that comes with knowing what to expect. Patterns also shape memory. You are more likely to remember information if it fits a pattern you already know. This is why mnemonics work, why rhymes help you remember, why stories are easier to recall than random facts. The brain encodes information more effectively when it can link it to an existing structure, when it can fit the new into the familiar. But patterns can also trap us. If the brain learns a pattern that no longer serves, if it repeats a behavior or a thought out of habit rather than need, it can be difficult to change. The brain resists change. It prefers the known, even if the known is uncomfortable, even if the known is causing harm. This is why breaking a bad habit is so hard. Brain has learned a pattern, has made it automatic, and it does not want to let go. But change is possible, not through force but through patience. Through creating new patterns, through repeating new behaviors until they become familiar, until the brain accepts them, until they too become automatic. This takes time. It takes consistency, but it is possible. The brain is not fixed, it is adaptable, and it will learn whatever you teach it as long as you teach it gently, repeatedly, without giving up. Brain also finds comfort in rhythm. Music, for example, is deeply soothing because it is structured, predictable, repetitive. Your brain can anticipate the beat, can follow the melody, can rest in the pattern without needing to think. This is why lullabies work. This is why certain types of music help you focus, help you relax, help you sleep. The rhythm entrains the brain, guides it into a matching pattern, a matching pace. And the brain, always seeking patterns, follows willingly. Speech has rhythm too. The pace of a voice, the rise and fall of sentences, the pauses between words, all of this creates a pattern that the brain can attune to. And when the rhythm is slow, when the pauses are long, when the voice is soft, the brain begins to slow as well. It begins to match the rhythm. It begins to relax into the pattern, the way a child relaxes into the rhythm of a parent's heartbeat. This is not manipulation. This is resonance. This is the brain doing what it does naturally, which is to find patterns, to follow them, to let them guide it into states of calm, of focus, of rest. And so, as you listen, as the voice continues its slow, steady rhythm, your brain is already beginning to follow. It is already beginning to slow. It is already beginning to recognize the pattern, to anticipate the pauses, to settle into the gentle, predictable flow. And in that settling, in that recognition, there is safety. There is comfort. There is the deep, quiet reassurance that comes from knowing what comes next, from feeling the steady, unchanging rhythm that carries you slowly, gently, deeper into rest. Decisions are not as deliberate as they feel. Most of the time, you do not consciously weigh every option, analyze every possibility, and then choose. Instead, decisions happen beneath the surface, shaped by instinct, by habit, by the quiet calculations of the subconscious mind. You decide what to eat for breakfast, but you do not deliberate. You simply reach for what feels right. You decide which route to take to work, but you do not plan. You simply follow the pattern you have followed 100 times before. Most decisions are not decisions at all. They are defaults, automatic responses, the brain choosing the path of least resistance. And this is not laziness. This is efficiency. The brain cannot afford to spend conscious energy on every small choice. It would be exhausting. It would be overwhelming. And so, the brain automates as much as possible, turning repeated decisions into habits, into reflexes, into patterns that require no thought. This is why you can drive home and not remember the journey. The brain was making countless decisions, when to turn, when to brake, when to accelerate, but it was doing so automatically, without conscious involvement. And this is good. It is adaptive. It frees the conscious mind to focus on what actually matters. But it also means that many of the choices you think you are making are not really choices. They are repetitions. And if you want to make a different choice, if you want to break a pattern, you have to bring that automatic process back into awareness. You have to notice it. You have to interrupt it, not with force, but with attention. Even the decisions that feel deliberate, the ones where you sit down and think and weigh the options, are influenced by factors you are not aware of. Your mood affects your decisions. If you are tired, you are more likely to choose the easy option, the one that requires the least effort. If you are hungry, you are more likely to make impulsive choices. If you are stressed, you are more likely to avoid risk. These are not conscious considerations. They are background influences, subtle shifts in the way the brain evaluates options. Psychologists call this decision fatigue, the idea that making decisions depletes mental energy, and the more decisions you make, the worse your decisions become. This is why people who make many decisions throughout the day, executives, judges, doctors, often rely on routines, on rules, on anything that reduces the number of choices they have to make. It is not that they lack willpower. It is that willpower is a finite resource, and it runs out. And when it runs out, the brain defaults to the easiest option, which is usually the one it has chosen before. This is why diets fail in the evening. This is why people give in to temptation after a long day. Not because they are weak, but because the brain is tired and it no longer has the energy to resist the automatic, habitual choice. But here is the gentle insight. If decisions are tiring, then reducing decisions is restful. If you can simplify your life, if you can create routines, if you can remove unnecessary choices, you free up mental energy for the things that actually matter. This is not about being rigid. It is about being kind to yourself, about recognizing that the brain has limits and working with those limits rather than against them. Decisions are also emotional. You might think you are choosing rationally, weighing pros and cons, but research shows that emotion is deeply involved in every decision. People with damage to the emotional centers of the brain struggle to make decisions, even simple ones. They can analyze the options endlessly, but they cannot choose because they have no emotional signal to guide them. Emotion is not the enemy of reason. It is part of reason. It is how the brain assigns value, how it determines what matters. Without emotion, nothing would matter. Everything would be neutral, equally important, equally irrelevant. And so, when you feel drawn to one option over another, when something just feels right, that is not irrational. That is your subconscious mind, synthesizing years of experience, countless patterns, and delivering a conclusion in the form of a feeling. You do not always need to understand why you feel it. You can simply trust it, not blindly, but gently, recognizing that the feeling is information, worth considering, worth listening to. And sometimes, the best decision is not to decide. Not right now, not when you are tired or stressed or overwhelmed. Sometimes the best decision is to rest, to let the mind settle, to wait until clarity returns. Because the mind makes better decisions when it is calm, when it is rested, when it is not being pushed. And so, as you lie here, you do not need to decide anything. You do not need to figure anything out. You do not need to solve any problems. You can let all of that go, just for now, just for tonight. You can let the decisions wait until tomorrow, when the mind is fresh, when the fog has lifted, when the quiet workings of rest have restored clarity, balance, and the gentle knowing that guides you toward what is right. Imagination is the mind's ability to create what is not there, to picture a place you have never been, to hear a voice that is not speaking, to feel an emotion that has no external cause. Imagination is not pretending. It is not fantasy. It is one of the most powerful tools the mind possesses, the ability to simulate experience, to rehearse the future, to explore possibilities without risk. When you imagine yourself succeeding at a task, the brain activates the same regions it would activate if you were actually performing that task. This is why athletes visualize their performance before competing. This is why musicians imagine playing a piece before touching their instrument. Imagination is practice. It is preparation. It is the mind rehearsing, strengthening pathways, making the imagined more likely to become real. But imagination is not just about the future. It is also about memory. When you remember something, you are not replaying a recording. You are imagining it, reconstructing it from fragments, filling in gaps, creating a coherent narrative from incomplete information. Memory and imagination use the same neural networks. They are not separate faculties. They are two sides of the same process, the mind's ability to create experience, whether that experience is labeled as past or future. Children are masters of imagination. They can turn a box into a spaceship, a stick into a sword, a blanket into a fortress. They do not need elaborate props. They do not need permission. They simply imagine fully, completely, without doubt. And in that imagining, the experience is real. The joy is real. The adventure is real. As adults, imagination often becomes more constrained. We learn to distinguish between real and imagined. We learn that imagining something does not make it true. And while this is necessary, it can also be limiting. Because imagination is not just about truth, It is about possibility. It is about seeing beyond what is into what could be. Imagination is where creativity begins. Every invention, every work of art, every innovation started as something imagined. Someone pictured it, felt it, believed it could exist, and then made it real. Without imagination, nothing would change. Everything would remain as it is. Imagination is not frivolous. It is essential. But imagination can also be a source of suffering. If you imagine a future full of failure, full of rejection, full of loss, the brain responds as if that future is real. It activates the stress response. It floods the body with cortisol. It creates anxiety, not from any present danger, but from the imagined danger that has not happened and may never happen. This is the double edge of imagination. It can create hope, or it can create fear. It can motivate, or it can paralyze. And the difference is not in the imagination itself, but in what you choose to imagine and how you relate to what you imagine. Because imagination is always a choice. Not a conscious choice, perhaps, but a pattern, a habit of thought. And like any habit, it can be changed. If you find yourself imagining worst-case scenarios, you can notice that and gently redirect. Not by forcing positive thinking, but by asking, what else is possible? What else could happen? What is one small step I could take? Imagination does not have to be grand. It does not have to be elaborate. It can be simple, gentle, quiet. Imagining a soft light. Imagining the tension in your shoulders melting away. Imagining your breath slowing, deepening, carrying you down into rest. This is not fantasy. This is guidance. This is using the mind's natural ability to create experience, to shape your present state, to invite the body and mind into the experience you want to have. And the body listens. The body responds, because the body cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. If you imagine warmth, you may begin to feel warmer. If you imagine calm, you may begin to feel calmer. This is not magic. This is neuroscience. This is the mind and body working together, creating experience from within. And so, as you lie here, you can imagine. You can imagine the weight of the day lifting. You can imagine the thoughts slowing, drifting, dissolving. You can imagine yourself sinking deeper into the bed, the body becoming heavy, the mind becoming soft. And in that imagining, you are not pretending. You are inviting. You are guiding. You are using the mind's own power to create the experience of rest, of peace, of sleep. And the mind, always responsive, always listening, will follow. You are not an island. You are part of a web, a vast, invisible network of connection that shapes who you are, how you think, how you feel. The human mind is inherently social. It developed not in isolation, but in groups, in tribes, in community. Where survival depended on cooperation, on communication, on the ability to read others, to understand others, to work together. Even now, even when you are alone, the social mind is active. It is thinking about others. It is remembering conversations. It is imagining what someone might think, what they might say, what they might feel. The mind is never truly alone. It carries others with it always. Mirror neurons, discovered in the 1990s, are one of the brain's most fascinating features. These neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform that action. If you see someone smile, the neurons that control your own smile activate. If you see someone in pain, the neurons associated with pain activate. You do not consciously decide to mirror. It happens automatically, beneath awareness, creating a direct neural link between you and the person you are observing. This is the foundation of empathy. It is how you understand what another person is feeling, not by reasoning or analysis, but by literally feeling it in your own body, in your own nervous system. You mirror their posture, their expression, their emotional state, and in doing so, you know what they know. This is why emotions are contagious. If you are in a room with someone who is anxious, you may begin to feel anxious. If you are with someone who is calm, you may begin to feel calm. Your nervous system is attuning, matching, resonating with theirs. And this happens without words, without conscious effort. It is the social brain at work, constantly scanning, constantly connecting, constantly seeking attunement. But this also means that who you spend time with matters, not just for moral reasons, but for neurological ones. The people around you shape your nervous system. They influence your mood, your stress levels, your sense of safety. If you are surrounded by people who are tense, who are critical, who are constantly activated, your nervous system will reflect that. But if you are surrounded by people who are calm, who are kind, who are present, your nervous system will reflect that instead. This is not weakness. This is how humans are designed. We regulate each other. We co-regulate. We create safety together, and we create stress together. The social mind is also the source of some of the deepest human needs. The need to belong, the need to be seen, the need to be understood. These are not superficial desires. They are fundamental. Studies have shown that social isolation activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Loneliness is not just an emotion. It is a signal, a warning from the brain that something essential is missing. And chronic loneliness is linked to a host of health problems: weakened immune function, increased inflammation, higher rates of depression and anxiety. Connection is not optional. It is necessary. But connection does not always mean being surrounded by people. It means feeling seen, feeling understood, feeling safe with at least one other person. It means having someone who knows you, who accepts you, who does not require you to perform or pretend. This is the connection that nourishes the mind, that calms the nervous system, that allows you to relax, to be vulnerable, to rest. And sometimes, connection can be found in unexpected places, in a voice, in a story, in a quiet moment of shared understanding, even if the other person is not physically present. The social mind is flexible. It can attune to a voice on a recording, to a character in a book, to the memory of someone who is no longer here. Connection is not just about proximity. It is about resonance, about finding something or someone that reflects back to you a sense of being understood. The social mind is also the part of you that worries about judgment, that fears rejection, that replays conversations, analyzing what was said, what was meant, what might have been misunderstood. This is not paranoia. This is the brain's attempt to maintain social cohesion, to make sure you are still accepted, still safe within the group. But in the modern world, where the group is vast and impersonal, where social interaction often happens through screens, this ancient mechanism can become exhausting. The brain is constantly scanning for threats to social standing, for signs of disapproval, for cues that you might be excluded. And because the brain is so sensitive to social threat, even small slights can feel overwhelming. But here is the quiet truth. Most people are not thinking about you as much as you think they are. They are thinking about themselves, about their own worries, their own fears, their own sense of being judged. The spotlight you imagine is not as bright as it feels, and the judgment you fear is often a projection, a reflection of how harshly you judge yourself. The social mind is not your enemy. It is trying to protect you, but it does not always need to be so vigilant. It can rest. It can let go of the constant scanning, the constant worry, the constant need to analyze every interaction. And one of the easiest ways to let it rest is to simply be here, in this moment, alone, without needing to perform, without needing to impress, without needing to be anything other than what you are. Just here, just breathing, just resting. And in that rest, the social mind quiets. It stops scanning. It stops worrying. It simply is. And that is enough. The nervous system is always seeking balance. It moves between two states, activation and rest, arousal and calm, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Neither state is bad. Both are necessary. Activation prepares you to meet challenges, to respond, to engage with the world. Rest allows you to recover, to digest, to heal. The problem is not stress. The problem is stress without recovery. activation without rest. The sympathetic nervous system, when triggered, prepares the body for action. The heart rate increases. Blood flows to the muscles. Glucose is released into the bloodstream. Digestion slows. The immune system is temporarily suppressed. This is the fight or flight response, and it is designed to be brief, a burst of energy to meet an immediate threat. Once the threat is gone, the parasympathetic nervous system is supposed to take over, calming the body, restoring balance, allowing all the systems that were temporarily shut down to resume their work. But in modern life, the threats are rarely brief. They are ongoing, chronic, relentless work stress, financial worry, relationship tension, news cycles, social media. The brain perceives all of these as threats, and the sympathetic nervous system stays activated, not because there is constant danger, but because the mind keeps interpreting the situation as dangerous, and the body responds accordingly. Cortisol levels remain elevated, inflammation increases, sleep becomes disrupted, the immune system weakens, digestion becomes irregular. Over time, chronic activation wears the body down, leading to a host of stress-related illnesses, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, chronic pain. This is not about being too sensitive. This is about a nervous system that is doing exactly what it was designed to do, but in an environment it was not designed for. The body cannot tell the difference between a predator and a deadline. It responds to both with the same ancient reflex. And so, the solution is not to eliminate stress. That is not possible. The solution is to restore balance, to give the parasympathetic nervous system a chance to do its work, to allow the body to rest, to recover, to return to equilibrium. And the simplest way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system is through the breath. Slow, deep breathing sends a signal to the brain that there is no emergency, that it is safe to relax. The vagus nerve, which runs from the brainstem to the abdomen, is activated by deep exhalation, triggering a cascade of calming effects throughout the body. The heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, muscles relax, the mind quiets. This is not placebo. This is physiology. This is the body's built-in mechanism for calming itself, and it is always available, always accessible, always within reach. Just the breath. Just the slow, deliberate act of breathing out, longer than you breathe in, and allowing the body to respond. Another way to activate the parasympathetic system is through gentle movement. Not intense exercise, but slow, mindful movement. Stretching, walking, swaying. Anything that signals to the body we are safe, we are not fleeing, we are not fighting, we are simply here. The body responds to this signal. It begins to relax. And rest is not just about sleep. Rest is about moments of stillness throughout the day. Moments where you stop, where you breathe, where you let the nervous system recalibrate. You do not need to meditate for an hour. You do not need to go on a retreat. You just need to pause, to close your eyes for a moment, to take 3 deep breaths, to let your shoulders drop. These small moments accumulate. They create space for the parasympathetic system to do its work. They prevent the chronic activation that leads to burnout, to exhaustion, to illness. The nervous system is also deeply affected by the environment. Soft lighting calms the nervous system. Harsh lighting activates it. Gentle sounds like rain or rustling leaves are soothing. Loud, sudden sounds trigger the startle response. Warm temperatures relax the body. Cold temperatures activate it. The nervous system is always responding to the sensory environment, always adjusting, always trying to maintain balance. And so, creating a restful environment is not indulgent. It is supportive. It is working with the nervous system rather than against it. And right now, as you lie here, you are in a restful environment. The lights are dim. The sounds are soft. The temperature is comfortable, and the nervous system is responding. It is beginning to shift out of activation and into rest. The heart is slowing. The breath is deepening. The muscles are releasing. This is not something you are doing. This is something that is happening naturally, inevitably, as the body recognizes that it is safe, that it can let go, that it can finally, fully rest. Time is not constant. It does not flow at a steady pace, the way a clock suggests. Time, as you experience it, is subjective, flexible, shaped by attention, by emotion, by the state of the mind. When you are engaged, when you are absorbed in something you love, time disappears. Hours pass in what feels like minutes. But when you are bored, when you are waiting, when you are anxious, time drags. Minutes feel like hours. The same amount of time, measured by a clock, feels entirely different depending on how the mind is experiencing it. This is called time perception, and it is influenced by many factors. Novelty stretches time. When you are experiencing something new, the brain is paying close attention, encoding every detail, and this makes the experience feel longer. This is why childhood feels endless. Every day was full of new experiences, new discoveries, new things to learn. But as you age, as life becomes more routine, time seems to speed up. The brain stops encoding as much. It stops paying as much attention. Days blur together, and years seem to pass in a flash. This is not because time is actually moving faster. It is because the mind is not marking it as carefully. Memory affects time perception. When you look back on a period of your life that was full of varied experiences, it feels long. But when you look back on a period that was routine, unchanging, it feels short, even though you lived through the same number of days. This is the paradox of time. In the moment, familiar experiences feel fast, but in memory, they feel short. Novelty feels slow in the moment, but long in memory. And this means that if you want life to feel longer, you do not need to live more years. You just need to live more fully, more attentively, more presently. To notice, to engage, to let each moment be marked, rather than letting them all blend together into an undifferentiated stream. The brain's sense of time is also tied to the body. When the body is relaxed, time feels slower. When the body is tense, time feels faster, more urgent. This is why relaxation practices seem to expand time. Not because they add hours to the day, but because they change how those hours are experienced. A single moment of true presence can feel vast, infinite, because the mind is not rushing forward, not thinking about what comes next, not lost in the past. It is simply here, and in that here-ness, time loses its grip. The concept of now is strange. The present moment, when examined closely, is almost impossible to define. By the time you notice it, it is already the past. The present is not a point. It is a window, a span of a few seconds during which sensory information, thoughts, and emotions are woven together into what you call this moment. But even this is a construction, a story the brain tells to create continuity, to make sense of the constant flow of experience. In meditation traditions, there is a recognition that time is not real in the way we assume. The past exists only as memory. The future exists only as imagination. The present is all there is. And the present is not a moment in time. It is the absence of time. It is the space in which experience unfolds, but which itself is not moving, not changing, not subject to the passage of hours and days. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is something you can feel when the mind is very quiet, when thought has settled, when there is only awareness itself, timeless and still. At night, time behaves differently. As you fall asleep, the sense of linear time dissolves. You might lie down and close your eyes, and a moment later, hours have passed. Where did the time go? You do not know. You were not there to experience it. Sleep is a gap in time, a period where the conscious mind is offline, where the ordinary sense of self and time and space disappears. And yet, the body knows. The body tracks time even when the mind does not. Circadian rhythms govern the cycles of sleep and wake, independent of conscious awareness. The body knows when it is time to sleep, when it is time to wake, even if you are not paying attention. And this internal clock is ancient, tuned to the rhythms of light and dark, of day and night, of the turning of the earth. You are part of these rhythms. You are not separate from them. You are a creature of time, and yet, in another sense, you are timeless. The awareness that watches thoughts, that experiences time, is itself outside of time. It does not age. It does not change. It is the constant background, the unchanging presence, the witness to all that arises and falls. And as you drift, as the night deepens, as time becomes less and less distinct, you are returning to that timeless place, not leaving yourself behind, but letting go of the stories, the urgency, the sense that there is somewhere else you need to be, something else you need to do. Just here, just now. Just this quiet, eternal, present moment where nothing is missing, nothing is wrong, and time at last dissolves. Sleep is not absence. It is not a void, not a shutting down. Sleep is a transformation, a shift into another mode of being where the mind continues its work quietly, deeply, beneath the surface of awareness. Every night you move through stages, from wakefulness into light sleep, then into deeper sleep, and finally into REM, the stage where dreams unfold. Each stage serves a purpose. Each one is essential. Light sleep is the transition, the doorway between waking and sleeping. The body begins to relax. The heart rate slows, the muscles soften, thoughts become fragmented, disjointed, drifting. This is the hypnagogic state, the threshold, and it is here that the mind is most open, most receptive, most easily guided. Deep sleep is where the body does its most profound healing. Growth hormone is released, cells are repaired, the immune system strengthens. The brain clears away the metabolic waste that has accumulated during the day, flushing toxins through the glymphatic system, a process that only happens during deep sleep. This is not rest as inactivity. This is rest as renewal, as restoration, as the body tending to itself in ways it cannot during the day. And then there is REM sleep, where the brain is almost as active as it is during waking, where the eyes move rapidly beneath closed lids, where the body is paralyzed to prevent you from acting out your dreams. This is where memory is consolidated, where emotional experiences are processed, where the mind makes sense of the day, integrating new information with old, weaving it into the fabric of who you are. Dreams are strange, illogical, impossible, and yet they feel real. You do not question them while they are happening. You accept that you can fly, that you are in two places at once, that time moves in loops. The rational mind is offline. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that governs logic and critical thinking, is quiet. And in its absence, the mind is free to explore, to create, to process without the constraints of reason. Dreams are not random. They are the mind's way of working through unresolved emotions, of rehearsing responses to potential threats, of consolidating memories, of making connections that the conscious mind might never see. You may not remember your dreams. Most are forgotten within minutes of waking, but they still serve their purpose. They still do their work. The mind does not need your conscious involvement to heal, to process, to grow. It does this on its own in the quiet hours of the night while you are elsewhere. Sleep also resets the emotional system. Without sleep, emotions become harder to regulate. Small frustrations feel overwhelming. Neutral faces begin to look threatening. The brain's amygdala, the center for emotional processing, becomes hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex, which normally regulates it, becomes less effective. This is why everything feels worse when you are tired. Not because the situations have changed, but because the brain is no longer able to respond with balance. But after a night of sleep, the world feels different. The problems that felt insurmountable yesterday feel manageable. The emotions that felt unbearable have softened. This is not because anything external has changed. It is because sleep has restored the brain's ability to regulate, to cope, to respond with resilience. Sleep is also where learning is solidified. If you study something before sleep, you are more likely to remember it the next day. The brain takes what you practiced, what you focused on, and strengthens those neural pathways during sleep. This is why musicians, athletes, and students are often told to practice before bed. The learning does not stop when you stop practicing. It continues quietly while you sleep. The mind is not idle. It is working, always working, even when you are not aware. But sleep is fragile. It is easily disrupted by light, by sound, by stress, by screens. Blue light from phones and computers signals to the brain that it is still daytime, suppressing melatonin, delaying sleep. Stimulating content, whether news or social media or work emails, keeps the mind activated, prevents it from winding down. And so, the transition to sleep requires intention. It requires creating space, creating quiet, creating darkness. It requires letting go of the day, not abruptly, but gently, gradually, like a ship drifting away from the shore. And right now, that transition is happening. The body is heavy. The breath is slow. The thoughts are fading. The mind is beginning its descent into sleep, into the deep, restorative darkness where it can finally let go, where it can release the weight of the day, where it can heal and process and rest. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to make it happen. It is already happening. Sleep is not something you force. It is something you allow. And the more you allow, the more you release, the more you let go, the closer it comes until finally, quietly, without effort, you slip beneath the surface and the waking world dissolves, and there is only the soft, silent, infinite space of sleep. And now, as we come to the end of this quiet journey, there is nothing left to understand, nothing left to learn. You have traveled through the landscape of the mind, touching on thoughts, emotions, memories, patterns, the subconscious, the body, the nervous system. You have seen how the mind works, how it rests, how it heals. And now there is only this, only the stillness, only the breath, only the slow, inevitable pull of sleep. The mind does not need to be controlled. It does not need to be managed. It knows what to do. It has been doing this for as long as you have been alive, guiding you into rest, guiding you into sleep, guiding you into the deep, quiet places where the self dissolves and all that remains is peace. Let your body be heavy. Let your thoughts be slow. Let the world fade. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do, no one you need to please, just this, just the soft, gentle descent into stillness. Your breath is slowing, your heart is slowing, the room is quiet, the night is quiet. And you are drifting slowly, softly, deeper and deeper into the place where the mind finally lets go, where thought becomes dream, where awareness becomes sleep, where you become nothing and everything all at once. Let go. Let the day fall away. Let the mind settle. Let the body rest. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where you need to be. And as the voice fades, as the words dissolve, as the silence deepens, know that the mind is doing its work. It is processing. It is healing. It is resting. And you do not need to be awake for this. You do not need to witness it. You only need to let it happen. So let go. Let the mind drift. Let sleep come. Not as something you do, but as something that arrives gently, quietly, like the tide returning to the shore. And you, soft and still, are carried with it into the deep, into the dark, into the quiet, endless, restful sea.